Welcome to the deep dive. We pull the signal from the noise.
Glad to be here.
So today we're getting into something I think pretty much everyone encounters. Passive aggression at work.
Oh, yeah, that subtle stuff that can drive you crazy.
Exactly. It's like workplace warfare, but, subtle. We want to help you spot it, handle it, and basically keep your cool.
And your job, hopefully.
Right. Our goal here is to kind of decode these hidden messages, these tricky interactions, so you feel more equipped.
Yeah, because passive aggression isn't just annoying, it's actually damaging. It really kills clear communication and trust.
It leaves you feeling sort of off balance, like you think you were just insulted, but you can't quite pin it down.
Precisely. That plausible deniability is key to how it works.
So we'll be digging into why people do it and, more importantly, what you can do about it.
We've got some specific examples lined up, some classic moves.
Good, because seeing examples helps. By the end of this, the idea is you'll, understand the tactics, maybe the motives, and definitely have some practical ways to respond.
Without causing a huge scene.
Let's start with the passive-aggressive playbook, as you called it, the greatest hits.
Okay, yeah. First up, the BCC bomb. You know this one. An email goes out, and someone quietly loops in your boss on BCC, maybe with a little note like, just keeping everyone in the loop, or for visibility.
Right, for visibility,
Right.
which sounds helpful, but what's really going on there? It's not just info sharing, is it?
Not usually, no. It feels more like tattling, or at least flagging something about you or your work to the boss without talking to you directly first.
It bypasses you completely. It's like a sneak attack masked as, efficiency.
Exactly. It avoids that direct, maybe uncomfortable conversation. They get their point across to the higher-ups, but indirectly.
Okay, so that's one. What's another classic?
Fake praise. This one's an art form.
Oh, I think I know this tune.
You present something and a colleague says, wow, that's an interesting way to approach it. We haven't done it that way before.
Ooh, yeah, the emphasis does all the heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
Interesting. That way.
Totally. It sounds neutral, maybe even complimentary on the surface, but the subtext is usually, that's weird, or I think this is going to fail.
It plants a seed of doubt without them having to actually voice a concrete criticism they'd need to defend.
Right. It's undermining, but subtly.
Yeah.
You feel criticized, but if you challenge it, they can just say, what? I just said it was interesting.
So frustrating. Okay, what else is in the playbook?
How about the super cheerful deadline reminder, usually with an emoji?
Oh, no, not the emoji.
Yeah, like a little smiley face or a nudge emoji. But here's the kicker. It arrives maybe 2 minutes after the deadline passed.
Ugh. So it's framed as a friendly check-in, but the timing makes it a clear you missed it.
Exactly. It's a passive way of pointing out you're late, wrapped in this like faux casual vibe.
It feels designed to make you look bad, or at least feel bad without an open accusation. Another little power play.
Definitely. So these are just a few examples, but you see the pattern. Indirect hostility.
Yeah, veiled negativity. So let's shift gears a bit. Why do people do this stuff? What's the psychology behind it?
Well, often it boils down to a few core things. One big one is, frankly, conflict avoidance, maybe even cowardice sometimes.
They don't want the direct confrontation.
Right. They feel negative about something, angry, disagreeing, whatever, but they're uncomfortable expressing that openly, so it leaks out sideways.
Makes sense. Easier to send a snarky email than have a difficult conversation.
For them, maybe. It can also be about power, though. Subtly putting others down, making them feel small or incompetent, but without leaving fingerprints.
Ah, the plausible deniability again. I was just trying to help. I was just asking a question.
Exactly that. They can always retreat to innocence if called out. It gives them cover.
Okay, so understanding the why is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we deal with it without losing our minds? You mentioned a specific trick.
Yes, the repeat it back technique. It's quite effective at forcing clarity.
How does that work in practice?
So when someone says something with that passive-aggressive edge, you calmly repeat the loaded part back to them as a question.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say someone says, well, given your bold strategy on this, and it feels like bold means reckless.
Right.
You could say calmly, just so I'm clear, when you say bold strategy, what specifically are you referring to? Or even when you say bold, are you suggesting there are risks we haven't considered?
Ah, I see. You're making the implicit explicit. You're basically asking them to own the subtext.
Precisely. They either have to double down and state their criticism directly, which they probably want to avoid, or they have to backtrack and clarify, often saying something like, oh no, I just meant it's innovative,
Either way, it kind of diffuses the passive-aggressive payload. It takes away the sneakiness.
It really does. It forces a shift towards more direct communication.
I like that. Okay, so that's one tool. Let's talk about some other potential responses. You call them clapbacks that won't get you fired.
Yes, we need some careful phrasing here. These aren't about escalating, they're about setting boundaries professionally.
All right, scenario one, the micromanager. Constantly giving you helpful notes on stuff you've got handled.
Okay, for that one, something like, thanks so much for the input. I'll definitely keep these notes in mind. I'll be sure to flag if I run into any issues where I need help.
Polite but firm. It acknowledges them, but reinforces that you're in control and will ask if needed.
Exactly. It sets a boundary without being confrontational.
Okay, tougher one. The credit thief. You share an idea, next thing you know, they're presenting it as theirs. What can you even do there, especially in a meeting?
That's tricky. You don't want to derail the meeting, but you need to reclaim it subtly. You could try jumping in with something like, that's a great point, Name. I'm glad you liked the idea when we discussed it yesterday, building on that.
Yeah. So you're referencing your prior contribution without making a direct accusation. Smooth. Requires some guts, though.
It does. It needs to be delivered matter-of-factly, not angrily. The goal is gentle correction and reestablishing ownership.
Got it. What about the classic backhanded compliment? Wow, you're surprisingly good with technology for someone, you know.
Yes. For that, sometimes a bit of mild deadpan humor works. Maybe, thanks, keeping up is a full-time job, isn't it? Or even, and you're so direct for yours. Use with caution.
Okay, that last one feels a bit risky. Maybe just a simple thanks.
Often, a simple, slightly cool thanks is enough. It acknowledges you heard the barb without validating it or escalating. The key with all these is tone and context. Read the room.
Well, remember, HR isn't your therapist or your battle strategist, right? Use these judiciously.
Absolutely. This is about navigating, not warfare. Which brings us to another important point, culture.
Oh, right. What seems passive-aggressive to me might just be normal communication somewhere else.
Exactly. Communication styles vary hugely across cultures. Something that feels indirect or evasive in, say, American business culture might be standard politeness in another.
Like the example of, let's table this.
Perfect example. In the US, it often means, let's forget this. In the UK, it genuinely might mean, let's schedule a proper discussion for later. Very different intent.
So a U.S. person might think their UK colleague is being passive-aggressive, just shutting them down politely.
Correct. Or think about German directness, sometimes perceived as blunt or even rude by cultures that value more indirectness, but it's often not intended that way at all. It's just direct.
And the opposite, where indirectness is the norm.
Well, in many East Asian cultures, maintaining harmony is crucial, so direct disagreement is often avoided. A phrase like, the Japanese, we will consider it, might sound promising to a Westerner, but often it's actually a polite no.
Wow. So you could easily misread the signals if you're not aware of these cultural differences, assuming passive aggression where none exists.
Easily. It highlights the need for cultural awareness in diverse workplaces. So what can you do if you're unsure, if you suspect passive aggression, but it could be cultural?
What's the move?
Ask for clarification, but focus on behavior or outcomes. Something like, just to make sure I understand, could you perhaps rephrase that? Or what would be the ideal next step from your perspective?
So you're inviting them to be more direct without accusing them of anything.
Precisely. It opens the door for clarity, whichever the reason for the indirectness. It avoids assumptions.
That's really useful. Okay, so we can spot it. We have some responses. We understand the cultural angle. But what about deciding when to respond versus when to just let it go?
The strategic ignore. It's a valid tactic. For those one-off comments, the minor jabs that seem designed just to get a rise out of you, sometimes the best thing is zero reaction.
Don't feed the trolls, basically.
Pretty much. Starve it of the attention it seeks, but that only works for isolated incidents.
What if it's a pattern? Constant BCCs, little accidental slights, deleted messages?
Then ignoring isn't enough. That's when you need to start documenting. Keep a quiet record, dates, times, what happened, who saw it. Be specific and factual.
Why? Just for your own sanity or for potentially escalating?
Both. First, it helps you see if it is a real pattern or just you being sensitive. Second, if it continues and significantly impacts your work or well-being, that documentation becomes crucial if you need to talk to your manager or even HR.
Right. You need evidence, not just feelings. When does it cross the line to needing formal escalation?
When it's persistent, targeted, clearly undermining your ability to do your job, or creating a genuinely toxic environment. And when you escalate, focus on the behavior and its impact. Avoid labels like passive-aggressive.
Stick to the facts.
Oh.
On these dates, X happened and the result was Y.
Exactly. It's more professional and harder to dismiss. We heard a story, actually,
Oh, yeah.
about someone dealing with a chronically passive-aggressive peer. They tried something interesting. They started overly agreeing with the sarcastic comments.
How did that work?
Like the peer would say something cutting disguised as a suggestion, and the person would respond with huge enthusiasm. That's a brilliant point. We absolutely must discuss this with the whole team. Let me add it to the agenda.
Huh. Turning the tables. Forcing the negativity out into the open under the guise of agreement.
Apparently, it completely flustered the peer. The passive aggression lost its power when it wasn't met with frustration, but with exaggerated acceptance. Eventually, the behavior lessened.
That's a bold move. Maybe not for everyone, but fascinating. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's give people some homework.
All right. First task. Glance back through your recent emails or messages. Can you spot maybe 2 or 3 phrases that might have had a passive-aggressive undertone?
Just identify them. Bonus points if you mentally try the repeat it back trick on one.
Second task. Pick one of those non-HR triggering responses we talked about. Practice saying it out loud, maybe to your cat, maybe just in the mirror.
Get comfortable with the words. It makes it easier to deploy under pressure.
Exactly. Low-stakes practice.
Good stuff. And just a little teaser for our next deep dive. We'll be tackling the art of saying no. How to set boundaries politely but firmly.
Ooh, that's a big one, too. Looking forward to it.
Me too. So until then, here's a final thought to chew on. Think about how much workplace stress could just evaporate if communication was more direct.
A lot, probably.
What's one tiny shift you could make, maybe this week, to encourage a bit more directness, either in how you speak or how you ask others to speak?
Something to consider.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.